Join the Thinking in English Conversation Club right now. For just $2 a week, you can join with other English learners, practice speaking, have conversations, enjoy yourself, and use new vocabulary. We run conversation clubs every Tuesday and Thursday at 12 p.m, 6 p.m, and 9 p.m. UK time. So there's no excuse. You can join, and you should join right now. Join the Thinking in English Conversation Club, link in the description. Hello, my name is Tom Wilkinson, and welcome to the Thinking in English podcast, a podcast for intermediate to advanced level English learners. Last week, I talked about Mansa Musa, an African king with indescribable wealth. Today, I'm going to discuss more of the wealthiest people in history. From the emperors of Song Dynasty China, Rome and the Mughal Empire, to American industrialists like John D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie. Let's listen, learn and practice our English. You can find the full transcript for free over on the Thinking in English blog. Check out my YouTube page and my Instagram page, both linked in the description. Subscribe to me over on Patreon for a conversation group. And here is today's vocabulary list. As always, the written list is available in the description of the podcast and also on my blog, thinkinginenglish.blog. Worth. Having a particular value, especially in money. As in, our house is worth £200,000. Equivalent. Having the same amount, value, purpose, qualities, etc. For example, she's doing the equivalent job in the new company, but for more money. Output. An amount of something produced by a person, machine, factory, country, etc. For instance, last year, manufacturing output fell by 14%. Extravagant. Spending too much money or using too much of something. For example, he had the extravagant lifestyle of a movie star. To invest. To put money into something to make a profit. For instance, the institute will invest $5 million in the project. To finance. To provide the money needed for something to happen. As in, the city council has refused to finance the project. Monopoly. An organization or group that has complete control of something, especially in an area of business, so that others have no share. For example, there are laws to stop companies becoming monopolies. To fund. To provide the money to pay for an event, activity or organization. As in, the company has agreed to fund my trip to Australia. Last week, I released an episode on Mansa Musa, Sultan of the Mughal Empire. He is considered to be the richest person in history by many historians. Although it is incredibly difficult to make an accurate estimate of his wealth, Musa was incomprehensibly and indescribably wealthy. But was he the richest? I mentioned this in the episode last week, but I want to emphasize it now. Musa was incredibly wealthy, but we don't actually know how wealthy he was. The numbers I suggested of around $500 billion in net worth are a complete guess by historians. He could have been worth less, or, more likely, considerably more. comparing wealth and fortunes across time and countries is difficult. What is important is not necessarily how much money a person has, but what they can buy with that money. Think about it this way. $100,000 is very different in San Francisco, one of the most expensive cities in the world, and South Sudan, the country with the lowest average income. There is no perfect exchange rate or measurement to calculate and compare net worth. So I thought I would introduce some other contenders for the title of richest person in history. Ridiculously rich kings, emperors, and sultans. Augustus Caesar was the first emperor of the Roman Empire. He reigned from the year 27 BC until AD 14 and is considered by many to be one of the greatest leaders in history. Augustus expanded Rome dramatically, taking over Egypt, Dalmatia, completing the conquest of Hispania, and taking over territories all over the place. According to the historian Ian Morris, Augustus had a personal wealth equivalent to around 1/5 of the Roman Empire's entire economy. At the time, the empire produced over 25% of the world's economic output. In today's money, it would mean that Augustus Caesar had a personal fortune of over $4.5 trillion. A trillion is a million or 1,000 billion, and that is a lot. Around 1,000 years later, the emperors of Rome were long gone and not the wealthiest people in the world, but the emperors of China may have been. I recorded an episode on the Song Dynasty last year. It was one of the most advanced and economically powerful empires of all time. Emperor Shizong, Song leader in the 11th century, ruled an empire which controlled over 25% of the world's economic output, just like Augustus Caesar did 1,000 years earlier. At the same time as the Song dynasty was dominating the economy in Asia, there were some very rich people in Western Europe too. Alan the Red was the nephew of William the Conqueror, the Norman ruler who conquered England. Alan owned large amounts of land across England and France, which would be worth hundreds of billions of dollars today. Genghis Khan created one of the greatest and most expansive empires of all time. From China to the edge of Europe, all of it was controlled by the Khan's Mongolian Empire. The most valuable trade routes, natural resources, and wealthy societies were taken over by him. However, Genghis Khan chose not to take the wealth for himself. He had no house, no palaces, no temple, and no tomb after he died. He shared his wealth with his soldiers, and the Mongolian army was banned from taking personal loot. Genghis could have been the richest person in history, but he wasn't interested in money. He was interested in power and influence. And in the 16th century, the Mughal Empire in North India became the world's largest economy. Akbar I, like Augustus Caesar and Emperor Shizong, controlled a quarter of the world's economic output. The Mughal society was supposedly one of the wealthiest and extravagant societies in the world. You may have noticed something about the people I've mentioned so far. Mansa Musa, Genghis Khan, Alan the Red, Akbar I, Augustus Caesar, and the Emperor Shizong were all monarchs, or the family of monarchs. They were royals, emperors, and national leaders. Their personal wealth is connected to their empire and country. But how about the richest business people in history? The richest people who were not royals or leaders. People who made their money in industry or trade. Jakob Fugger. Jakob Fugger was born in 1459 in the city of Augsburg in the Holy Roman Empire, modern-day Germany. He was known as Jakob the Rich, which tells you a lot about his reputation and wealth. He was part of the Fugger family of merchants, and along with his brother, moved the family business into the textile, metal, and mining industries. Jakob invested in mines in Silesia and leased copper mines in modern-day Slovakia, which would become the most important mine in Europe in the 16th century. Fugger built trading relationships with some of the most powerful states of early modern Europe, including the Habsburg family and Roman Curia. He also had a close relationship with the Holy Roman Empire and the Catholic Church. Jakob Fugger's immense wealth was equivalent to over $400 billion today. He traded extensively in some of the most valuable industries in Europe. Fugger also traded spices in Asia and the Portuguese Empire, and financed explorations around the world. Jakob Fugger was deeply involved in European politics. He financed the election of Charles V as the new Holy Roman Emperor, loaned money to King Henry VIII of England, and funded many of the changes in 16th century Europe. Martin Luther, the founder of the Protestant Christian movement, was supposedly inspired due to the corruption of the Catholic Church, corruption that was funded by the Fugger family. Jakob Fugger is barely known today, but he was one of the richest people to ever live, and with an estimated wealth of at least $400 billion, he was twice as rich as the world's richest man today. Marcus Licinius Crassus. Marcus Licinius Crassus was known as the richest man in Rome. As he lived over 2,000 years ago, it is difficult to estimate his wealth accurately, but he was almost certainly the richest person in the world while he was alive. Crassus's wealth was equivalent to the entire budget of the Roman Republic. He was as rich as the country in which he lived, and that certainly makes him a contender for one of the richest people in the world. Crassus was born into a moderately wealthy family, but his father and older brother were killed in a civil war around the year 89 BC. Marcus fled from the conflict, hiding out in Spain for years to avoid the same fate as his family. Eventually, an army was assembled to retake Rome, and Crassus joined the effort with his own troops from Spain. How did a Roman general become one of the richest people in history? Well, after the army took back Rome, the lead general, named Sulla, seized property across the Republic. The idea was to confiscate the property from enemies of Sulla and Rome and sell it to raise funds. Crassus took charge of this process, and he sold most of the property to himself. He became the richest man in Rome after taking the property for his own benefit. He also stole objects from the Temple of Jerusalem and created one of the first and most infamous fire brigades in the world. If a building was on fire in Rome, a group of slaves led by Crassus would quickly arrive. Crassus would offer to buy the building at a very cheap price. If the owner refused, they would let the building burn down. If the owner agreed, the slaves would save the building from the fire. Crassus was tremendously wealthy. He was also incredibly unpopular. His wealth was largely built by stealing and tricking citizens of Rome. John D. Rockefeller. John D. Rockefeller was perhaps the richest American to ever live. He was born in New York State in 1839, and his father was a traveling salesman. The family moved to Cleveland, Ohio in 1853, where John studied briefly at school. At the age of 16, Rockefeller started working as an office clerk in a Cleveland firm that bought and sold commodities. A few years later, he established his own firm. The 1860s in the USA was the start of the North American oil industry. The first oil well was established in 1859, and early investors quickly tried to make fortunes in the industry. Rockefeller was one of the most successful. In 1863, Rockefeller invested in an oil refinery in Cleveland, and 2 years later he bought the refinery outright. In 1870, Rockefeller founded the Standard Oil Company of Ohio, which quickly gained a monopoly over the oil industry. They bought rival companies, and by 1882, the Standard Oil Trust controlled 90% of oil refineries and pipelines in the USA. The company was a true monopoly. They owned the oil producers, the pipelines, the refineries, and the companies selling oil. They even built the oil barrels and employed the scientists to test the oil. Rockefeller was the largest shareholder of one of the biggest monopolies in American history. After decades of court cases, the US Supreme Court ruled that Standard Oil was too big and breaking antitrust or anti-monopoly laws. The company was broken down into 30 smaller companies. Rockefeller, as an incredibly wealthy individual, had also been accused of corruption, bribery, and being too powerful. Rockefeller retired from the company in the 1890s and gave away most of his money to charity. He founded universities as well. For example, he funded the foundation of the University of Chicago. John D. Rockefeller passed away at the age of 97. As the largest shareholder of one of the most valuable and powerful companies in history, Rockefeller was also one of the wealthiest people in history. His income tax return in 1918 was equivalent to 2% of US economic output, which in 2014 would be around $350 billion. Andrew Carnegie. Rockefeller gave away much of his income, but he was inspired to do so by perhaps an even wealthier American, Andrew Carnegie. Andrew Carnegie was born in Dunfermline, Scotland, and moved with his family to the USA in 1848 at the age of 13. His parents had supported an unsuccessful political and religious movement in Scotland, and had to sell all their possessions to afford the trip across the Atlantic Ocean. The family settled in Pennsylvania. Andrew, a 13-year-old boy, worked all day in a cotton mill to help his family's money problems. He then went to work as a messenger and later a telegraph operator. His skills with the telegraph got him a job with the Pennsylvania Railroad, and he became superintendent at the age of 24. Although Carnegie lacked formal education, he was given the chance by a local resident to read books from a library. This was a really rare opportunity for working class boys in the USA in the 19th century. Carnegie's business career started with a piece of advice from his boss at the railroad. His boss told Carnegie that the Adams Express Company was about to sell 10 shares, and he recommended Carnegie to buy some. After mortgaging his house, Carnegie bought the 10 shares for $500 and quickly started to receive dividends or a return on his investment. Carnegie continued to invest while working on the railroads. He invested in the first company to put sleeping cars on US trains, and by the age of 30 had invested in oil wells, iron, steamboats, and the railroads. But it was his investments in the steel industry that made him one of the wealthiest people in history. The Carnegie Steel Corporation, founded by Andrew in 1892, was the world's largest steel company. He sold it to J.P. Morgan in 1901 for $480 million in 1901, equivalent to 2.1% of the US economic output, or around $370 billion in 2014 money. Carnegie is best known and remembered for his charity. He built public libraries in his hometown of Dunfermline, Scotland, and eventually Carnegie libraries were constructed across the English-speaking world. In fact, he spent $55 million. In the 19th century, that was an incredibly high amount of money, just on libraries. If you remember, Carnegie educated himself through a library, but there were no public libraries at the time he was alive. He is considered the father of modern public libraries. Carnegie had decided early on that he would be giving away his entire fortune. His wife even signed an agreement to give away all of her money as well when they married. Carnegie paid for church organs, established influential charities and trusts, and funded universities and colleges. His goal was to give away his money to fund world peace and education. Andrew Carnegie has influenced modern-day billionaires like Warren Buffett and Bill Gates. Carnegie wrote in his book, The Gospel of Wealth, that the man who dies thus rich dies disgraced. He was immensely wealthy, like everyone else I mentioned today. But he did not come from royalty or from a rich family or from high education. He was a poor immigrant with no formal education, who went from working in cotton mills and on the railroad to owning the largest steel company in the world. So here is today's final thought. Who was the wealthiest person in history? The question is too difficult to answer. The emperors of China, Rome, India, Mongolia, and more controlled vast amounts of wealth and land. Mansa Musa, the subject of last week's episode, owned most of the world's gold. And the industrialists of Europe and America controlled oil and steel production. Comparing wealth across time is always going to be impossible. But I thought it was important to end today's episode with Andrew Carnegie, the richest man in America, who gave away his entire fortune to support education and world peace, and who came from a working-class Scottish immigrant family. But what do you think? Who was the wealthiest person in history in your mind? Is there anyone that I missed from today's episode? Let me know in the comments on the Thinking in English blog, the comments on Spotify, or send me a message on Instagram. Please follow me on Instagram as well. We're at about 11.3 thousand people over on Instagram, which is incredible. So let's see how many followers we can get in 2023. It would be awesome maybe to get to 15,000 in the next few months. That's my current goal. You can also go and leave a like or rating or review wherever you are listening right now. Apple reviews, if you're listening on Apple, are really important, so please leave me a review. And on Spotify, rate me 5 stars. Rating me 5 stars will make me be one of the most popular English podcasts out there. That was my goal last year, was to be the most popular, most highly rated English podcast on Spotify. And I think I'm quite close. So let's try and get to be the highest rated. If you love listening to Thinking in English, you can also subscribe to me over on Patreon. We have a conversation club 6 times a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays at 12 p.m, 6 p.m, and 9 p.m. UK time. And you can join as many or as little as you want. Last week we had a few people join 3 or 4 times in a week. So there's so many opportunities for you to practice speaking with other people, practice discussing topics you've probably never talked about before, and also join our community where we have chat rooms on food, IT and software development, film and TV, poetry, and more. I'm thinking of starting a politics chat room as well. So please join the Thinking in English community. The link is in the description on Spotify or on the website or in my Instagram bio. Wherever you're looking, you can join Thinking in English Patreon. And we're also doing some classes as well. It's a new trial thing we're doing, running classes on Wednesdays. If it's popular, if it's successful, we'll try and do classes on more days. So hopefully some of you are interested in classes with the Thinking in English team. So Nathan from Nathan's Fantastic English will be doing the Wednesday classes for now. So if you're interested in a Thinking in English class with other Thinking in English listeners, there's a link in the description as well. But that's enough of me talking. Thank you all so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let me know what you think if you enjoyed it, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye.